I would like to start, thank you all for coming to our presentation. This presentation will be done in two parts. The first half will be about Unification Church, and the latter half will be about Jehovah's Witnesses. And I and Ms. Nagano will be talking about the issue of Unification Church, and then Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Tabata will be talking about the issue of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, the title of my presentation is called Unification Church, Acknowledgement and Solution, and How It Got There. By the way, my name is Takashi Yamaguchi. I'm a lawyer, practice law at the legal office in Tokyo, Japan. Since I joined the current firm in October 2003 and joined the national network of Puerto Rican spiritual cells, I have been involved in the case of so-called cults on the side of victims and those who are concerned about its harm and disturbs the peace of life and negative influence on human rights in society. I have been attending this ICSA conference in 2004, 2018 every year and presented in many of them. I feel good to be back after 6 years and to see old things and new ones. Now, National Network of Spiritual Cells. When you look this up, there's a website called thebitterwinter.org. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with that, has a very negative version about it. But I just want to make sure that we're not anti-religion communist proxies trying to carry out an agenda. I personally identify myself as a moderate conservative, and I support the current ruling party, the LDP. The rhetoric of the coming conspiracy sounds absurd when faced with the fact that the current government, the Conservative Party, LDP, has been in power for most of the period after 1955, and the left has always remained a political minority, maybe a noisy minority, but minority. It began with the assassination of the Japan's ex-leader, Mr. Abe. He was shot while he was giving a speech to help his election campaign and his fellow party candidate. Very tragic incident. Now, the Abe assassination suspect, Tetsuya Yamagami, was arrested on the spot. He has been indicted for murder and violations of firearms and the sort of control law. Right after the shooting, the word went around that the shooting was motivated by a grudge he held against a religious group. And it did not take long to be revealed that the group was the Unification Church. Yamagami has admitted to the shooting, saying he targeted Mr. Abe over his ties to the Unification Church, which he had held a long grudge against, saying that his mother's blind faith in and excessive donations to the Unification Church had ruined his life, and his family. Yamagami's father died by suicide in his childhood, which prompted the mother to join the Unification Church. According to the news, the mother donated over 100 million yen to the group, including life insurance payments that the family received after the father's death. Yamagami, who attended a high school in Nara. It was a very competitive, very high-level high school, but he had to give up college education because of the excessive donations of his mother. Now, why Mr. Abe was targeted was because Mr. Abe had sent a congratulatory video message to a group posted church in September 2021, which motivated Yamagami to target Mr. Abe. So this kind of opened the can of worms or spilled the beans about what was going on. So this shooting brought to UC its past wrongdoings and the political infiltration, the plight of the victims, and especially the plight of the second generation members into the limelight. Complaints and criticism about Unification Church activities first emerged in Japan in the 1980s. So the complaints and criticism about Unification Church's activities first emerged in Japan in the 1980s. The issue resurfaced after this fatal shooting of Mr. Shinzo Abe. The group had long long relationship with the ruling party, the LDP, and then members of the reshuffled cabinet of Prime Minister Kishida and other LDP lawmakers. This raised a lot of concern in the Japanese public, and the issue of the unification church brought a lot of attention, and the government had to take action. This now, 次のページお願いします。違う。違う。矢印でやる。これでやる。矢印。方向ボタンです。Now, one of the moves was formation of a new liaison committee to assist the potential victims of the Unification Church. This was the first time the Japanese state recognized that you see as an entity causing social problems and acknowledged that those suffering from these activities you see were indeed victims who deserved attention and help. This was a very big change in attitude, which never happened since the 1980s until then. And then the Consumer Affairs Agency also set a panel to address the matter. And it was not, although this was set by the National Consumers Agency, Minister Taro Kono, it was not limited to just the issue of the that was covered by the Commercial Affairs Agency, but generally to address the issue about the problems caused by the Unification Church. And the Kito Esquire, this guy is the lead lawyer. He's the chief partner of the firm that it belonged to. And the man in the middle is Taro Kono, the minister. Nearly 50% of the lawmakers of the LDP had Unification Church ties. This kind of shocked the Japanese public. Everybody knew that the LDP had a relationship with the Unification Church, but they never thought that they were so commingled with the group to this extent. And it was so what happened was that the group, Mr. Kishida tried to reshuffle the cabinet to make sure to get rid of all the ministers that were affiliated with the Unification Church. But only days after reshuffle the cabinet, it was revealed that a lot of new members who were chosen as cabinet ministers also had ties with the Unification Church, and even including Mr. Kishida. So this was a very big scandal. And even after the motion, which I will speak about later, the motion for dissolution concerning the Unification Church was filed, someone tapped the media about Mr. Moriyama, the minister responsible for filing the motion, about his past relationship and his endorsement he gave to the Unification Church that came out. I don't know who did it, but I think you know who. And now, so which made Mr. Kishida to say that the LDP is going to sever all ties with the Unification Church. Now, second generation members, not limited to the UC, a lot of them, the Jehovah's Witnesses, started speaking about their experience. And one of those who garnered public attention was Miss Sayuri Okada, who made a press conference at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan, titling Escaping the Clutches of a Cult. Now, this press conference by Miss Ogawa at the ICCJ, the international ICCJ is the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan, was held on October 7th of 2022. What the Unification Church did on October 7th was try to stop a press conference. Now, Miss Ogawa's parents are both active members of the UC, and with her father, the head of a church in his neighborhood, and with her father being used to be, not currently, but formerly the head of a church in his neighborhood, and her mother working on the campaign of church member running in local assembly elections. Now, what happened was that the Unification Church, its lawyers, her family, and father and mother had sent a fax to the press club saying that, basically saying that she was not in her right state of mind And that what she should not be is trusted and should not be given a place to speak. But she did speak up anyway. Then the Japanese government, after that, found that it had sufficient grounds to justify invoking the right to question under the Religious Corporation Act. visual. Now, the Religious Corporation Act is it's kind of long, it's arduous reading for non-lawyers, but basically what it says is that the government could request reports and ask questions when it found that it has reasonable cause to think that there are grounds for the organization to be dissolution. And to do so, to proceed due process, it has to ask the opinion of the Religious Corporation Council, which is an advisory body under the ministry under the cultural agency that consists of members of the religious society, scholars, etc. Page. Now, and also this one, which I would refer to later, is that the requesting reports and asking questions sanctions is not like a criminal investigation where you can get a warrant and do a raid on that. It doesn't have that kind of power, but it does have a kind of enforcement power. It's not a very strong one, but non-compliance could be punished up to a civil fine, not a criminal fine, a civil fine, or or you could maybe call it an administrative fine of not more than 100,000 yen. Then the big change was that the change of the government interpretation of the Religious Corporations Act. The Prime Minister mentioned when he was answering to the Diet that the interpretation of the Article 81 of the Corporation Act was going to be changed. Now, to understand that, you need to go we need to go back to the old ruling in 1995 about the dissolution motion against Om Shinrikyo. Now, the traditional interpretation by the Japanese government has been based on this interpretation, saying that the religious corporations are not subject to dissolution unless a criminal offense has been committed. Now, this interpretation came to be because the first dissolution and the second dissolution cases were both made against entities that had committed, crimes. In case of Shinrikyo, it was an act of violent terror, murder, and the second group was also committed mass fraud. So that was the traditional interpretation, but the Kishida cabinet changed the interpretation, saying that civil code violations, courts that could become a ground for dissolution. The former support this interpretation is supported by Unification Church, saying that we were not subject to dissolution because we have never been convicted of a criminal act. Where the latter has been supported by the National Network of Lawyers of Spiritual Cells and the victims groups. Okay, 15 minutes. So I'm not going into the details, but basically, this is the interpretation where it says, basically it's laws and regulations here. That's the interpretation or was in question. It means that whether that is limited to criminal violation or does it include civil code of violations. Well, definition of religion. I think we could skip that. Okay. And this is the Tokyo High Court ruling, which I mentioned. It used the word such as the penal code. I think this is just showing that penal code is an example, but somehow the government and unification church has traditionally interpreted it as meaning that it is limited to the penal code. Well, I mean, the constitutionality dissolution article, well, it's went into issue, but this has been resolved in the Omishinriko case. The article itself is considered constitutional, Now, a new law has been passed. It's called the Act on Preventing Unjust Solicitation of Donations by Corporations. I shouldn't put in the this is unnecessary. But basically, this law regulates how corporations what it does, it imposes a certain level of duty of care against corporations who solicit donations from individuals, saying that certain forms of solicitations are not allowed. And if they are doing, then the donations made can be rescinded or revoked in layman's terms. It's page. And this is just what's inside. I don't have time to go through all these details, but there are, like, for example, you got to make sure that the donations do not suppress the free will of individuals, or it can't be done to an extent that it hinders it undermines their ability to maintain their standard of living. Page. And 次のページ。あと次のページは。ここも次のページお願いします。Okay, then the education ministry to ask the court to find that unification or failure to answer the ministry's questions. The unification church did not failed to answer many of the questions or requests made under the Religious Corporation Act. So what the education ministry did was ask the court, well, they sent a notice to the court that they say mentioning that the unification church should be fined for non-compliance with the questions and requests. The unification church objected naturally, for refusing government questions. Their main argument was in violation of laws and regulation, which I showed you previously, is limited to criminal or administrative code violations. And they citing that the Tokyo High Court case of Yamaguchi was the precedent. And they also mentioned, since there are no court judgment that has found the representative or other important officers of the UC has ordered to commit de facto grounds for seeking dissolution, these acts are not the act of unification church or do not constitute the grounds for dissolution. That was the two big arguments that the unification has made when they were arguing about the fine case. Page. Now, the three-judge panel of the Tokyo District Court, 8th Chamber, ruling on March 26, 2004, ruled on these issues. Now, what it did was, first of all, it ruled that the laws and regulations in Article 81 of the Religious Corporation Act is not limited to criminal or administrative code violations, but also includes that are acts that are illegal under the civil code. And it also ruled that the Tokyo High Court about the Shinriko case is case specific and is irrelevant to the interpretation of the statute in this case. And also, UC's argument that there are no court judgments that has found that the representative or other important officer UC has ordered to commit the factual grounds for seeking dissolution. So we're not acts of the UC and do not constitute for grounds for dissolution was denied. There was, and also the court also found that there was enough suspicion for the state to justify an inquiry into the unification using its right to ask questions. So so basically, the unification church relied on its defensive. Well, the line of defense was about the. Okay. Well, saying that the Article 81 of the of the British Corporation Act does not include civil code violation, was like the Maginot Line for the Unification Church, but that has been compromised. And now it is this same panel would be handling the case about the dissolution as well. So this could, we could make a prediction about how the court would rule on the issue of dissolution, although we cannot be too optimistic at this point. Then the government finally moves for dissolution of Unification Church. And the important thing is here is one is the Japanese government acknowledged the mind control by the Unification Church, although not using the language literally. This is what Mr. Moriyama, the Minister of Education and Science, at the press conference had mentioned. So this is what Moriyama said. The former unifications continuously, since at least around 1980, had restricted the free decision-making of many people and caused them to make donations and purchase goods while their ability to make normal decisions were undermined. So this was like way, the state's way or the bureaucratic way of mentioning that there was some sort of mind control, which is what I think. And according to the Ministry of Cultural Affairs, the press release, this one, though these are the words of the minister that was made at the press conference, this is mentioned in the press release, is that, well, just look at what it's mentioned in red. For the purpose of gaining financial gain, all for the Unification Church, and they were causing many people to become anxious or confused when making donations or purchasing goods, and restricting free decision-making and causing many people to donate to purchase goods while preventing them from making normal judgments. So, now, I know that many of you from the Judeo-Christianity monotheism backgrounds have trouble imagining what the cultural ministry means by the sale of goods. I will start now giving visual examples. Now, these are seals. In Japan, we prefer to use seals instead of signatures. And they'll start at like prices starting at 300,000 yen to about 10 million yen at exorbitant prices. These are Buddhist rosaries. They are being sold for like 300,000 yen. Video. Now, these are ginseng extracts. They cost about 80,000 each, but they're sold in large quantities. So like, you find like a lifetime amount of these found in hands of the victims. And these are the vases which have come, that has become very famous as a symbol of the spiritual self by Unification Church. This one has cost $1.7 million. Only mentions. These are like just plaques. This one had costed over $50 million. And these Buddha statues of some Bodhisattva, I don't know who it is, but it's 2 million yen. And these are the pagodas. This one goes at 70 million yen, which is around what, 400,000 euros, I think, at the current rate. And this is the receipt, just to show that it was really an actual transaction, showing that 5,000 yen prepayment was made, and the remaining payment was made. Page. Basically, the grounds for seeking dissolution were like follows. There were like 22 judgments of Unification Church finding their actions illegal and ordering them to pay damages based on tort. And the other thing was the courts all over Japan had found these cases that were illegal. And these cases took at different times and different varied courses throughout Japan. But all these cases have identified one of these common modus operandi. Now, if you want to thoroughly read this, I will be glad to give you the data of the PowerPoints later. So, page. Now, this is the map of Japan archipelago. And these ちょっと戻してください。戻して。で these are the arrows or the places where the courts exist that has made judgments against unification church from the period of 1994 to March 26, 2021. So see, it's all over Japan. Well, basically, I mean, it's 419 victims that filed lawsuits settled, and there were 971 victims who had retained lawyers and reached settlement through negotiation. And these settlements suggest that the UC has been aggressively approaching individuals in fundraising. Manuals were made and used for proselytization, selling goods, and soliciting donations. The modus operandi is like your family's fortune is bad. This and year next year are very bad years for a family. If you purchase these special seals, you'll have better fortune. You just read these,
Can you go back?
What?
Can you just go back for the slide?
じゃあ一個戻してもらえるyou could, do one slide. This one?
Just go.
Okay.
Okay, and
Okay. Now. No, the ministry also said that the victims claim to have experienced prevalent modus operandi described before, and some who became believers you see mentioned being made to fundraise by using similar methods. So So just sum it up, the extent of that 22 losses, 169 plaintiffs. Total of 2.2 billion in damages, average 13.2 million per plaintiff, or 20.4 billion in 1,550 victims, averaging 13.1 yen per plaintiff. And those are the people we just spoke up, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, I think. And it was excessive. Like, for example, to make these donations, a lot of victims incorporated company funds. They exhausted retirement and employment benefits, compelled to make loans upon one's valuable, but they lost their life savings, lost the trust of family members. So the cultural ministry, the Ministry of Education and Science had found that the unification was in violation of laws and regulations. The regulation commits an act which is clearly found to harm public interest substantially. And they also said that these acts consider substantial deviation from the purpose of religious organization. That they were saying that a religious corporation is given like tax, privilege status because you were enhanced public good, but the unification was just committing these acts for their own monetary purpose. Page here. And so, the ministry said that it had committed an act which deviates substantially from the purpose of religious organization prescribed in the provisions of Article 2. Page here. And it also said that for these reasons, it gave out reasons why the UC's believers the acts of the UC's believers should be considered the act of the unification church. Even though its officers or representatives has not been directly found responsible. Page here. And, there has been criminal investigations against the Unification Church as well, all over Japan, in a very small period in the 2007 and between 2010. I think this was not mentioned in the motion by the ministry, but I think it did have some influence about when it came to making decisions about it. Page 8. Well, I think I just said this. Just page 8. And the Unification Church president was fined 100,000 yen for non-compliance with the ministry's request. Well, this is a paltry sum, but this has significance in the sense that the Tokyo District Court has denied the line of defense that the Unification Church has maintained throughout the period, saying that, no, we can't be, so we're not subject to dissolution because our acts were not found illegal under the criminal or the administrative code. Single page. Well, put it. Oh, sorry, this slide just overlapped. Sorry, single page. Yeah. And now what the Unification Church is doing now is that they're filing lawsuits against its critics. And there's has been at least 8 lawsuits filed against people who spoke of the Unification Church. The Unification Church lost the case 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There are 3 other cases that are currently pending. They lost 5, some are in appeal. Some of them have lost. One case, the Unification Church had filed to the Supreme Court because they also lost in Tokyo High Court, but this was the reaction by the Unification Church. And they were also, I didn't mention here, but they are also mentioning various municipal bodies for passing like resolutions by their local assemblies that we should cut ties with the Unification Church. And they were filing lawsuits against that also. And they lost in some of it, but we don't know about the outcomes of the coming lawsuits yet. Single page. I just want to say that the religious freedom, a word about religious freedom, because when you get involved in this trouble, the issue of cults, the issue of religious freedom, we seem to, we sometimes want to think very negatively about what it means about religious freedom. But you see, a lot of controversial groups or cults like Unification Church, when they're trying to fight criticism, they try to wield religious freedom as defense. But we're not really anti-religious bigots, are we? I'm not, and neither are the members of the National Network of Spiritual Sales or the Japan Society of Cultic Christian Recovery. I'm also sure that you're not also, but religious is important, but we always have to address the issue, think about the issue of is it important to whom? You have to keep in mind that the subject of religious freedom is religious can violate and do violate individual religious freedom. The individual's freedom always comes first. The concept of religion can be used to counter so-called cults using as a sword or prevent future harm. Okay, sorry, I made too much slides. Didn't have enough time to go through all of them, but that's all, folks. And now to Ms. Nagano.
I'd like to thank you for this privilege of being able to present today. I'm Kyoko Nagano, lawyer in Japan. I have expertise in corporate law, and I'm leading a ministry to assist cult victims in my Christian church. I am here today in my personal capacity as a lawyer. As the title of my presentation shows, I'd like to clarify that the ongoing private litigation and the procedure for dissolution order against the Unification Church is not the prosecution against the Unification Church or against its beliefs. For this, I will be presenting the legal rules under Japanese law. Further, I'd like to examine the government attitude towards child abuse along with issues involving freedom of faith. I'd like to share the view.
It's a PDF.
So
Better. I'm looking at PDF, not a PowerPoint. So.
Yes, just
Sorry.
I think this is okay. So thank you. So as a starting point, I would like to share the view which I believe to be common in Japan, which is that the matter involving Unification Church, which is a serious tort matter. And as Yamaguchi-san explained detail, Japanese courts has held that orchestrated activities of the Unification Church seeking to obtain money from individuals that they are illegal. And the government has also determined that the activities has caused serious harm to society. And this conclusion, being illegal, their activities is that I think this shows exceptional situation in Japan. In Japan, of course, the freedom of faith is constitutionally protected. The next slide, please. As background, Japanese citizens have a constitutional right of freedom of religion. This is backed by a further constitutional separation of religion in the government. In this regard, Japan has similar system as France and the United States. And not surprisingly, when this approach of separation is applied to Japanese courts, I believe strict limitation of judicial power is the result. Court may not adjudicate or review religious matters, and court cannot decide what is the right or correct religious belief. These positions arise from Japanese law concept, which treats all youth equally, irrespective of the content and without reference to one view over the other. And next slide, please. In line with this principle that judicial power needs to be religiously neutral, the court has a generic definition of religion, which says that religion is the worship in mind and action of supernatural or transcendent beings on the basis of a conviction of the existence of such beings. However, we now have a more recent definition of faith. This is targeting faith, but if we talk about religion in the same thing, I believe, which is not neutral. Under this approach, court has held that faith is an unscientific, unreasonable belief on supernatural matters, which is hard to be tested by science or logic. Personally, I do not understand where this negative definition comes from, but for your information, this definition approach is being used in the cases concerning Unification Church. As some of you may know, as Japanese are skeptical about religion generally, the scope of faith, reference to faith, might be broader. If this is the case, this negative definition could be contradictory to the limits that are supposed to exist on the judicial power, which is judicial power cannot judge religious matters and need to be neutral when considering such matters. Next slide, please. Next, yes. In Japan, again, the limitation of the freedom of faith are applicable legal principles, but court practice appear not to be. Court practice appear not to be somewhat immature. We have two categories. General points, limitation of freedom of faith must be minimized. This is the principle, but exceptions, serious tort cases and criminal serious tort case, criminal cases, application of the tort law and criminal law is very straightforward. And in my opinion, on the Unification Church cases, under this exceptional rules. Interestingly, for my the general points for the president, we have very few legal precedents for the general area, but we have not a few legal precedents in exceptional area. So we don't have what is the minimized restriction over the freedom of faith. This is the situation. So going back to today's main topic of the analysis of the ongoing matters, the legal action against the Unification Church. Next slide, please. Litigation, the dissolution order. This is related to Unification Church. The legal action against the Unification Church by the lawyer team is merely a legal consequence of the commission of serious tort by the church in certain of its activities. This serious tort also resulted in the government bring an application for an order for dissolution over the church, which remains pending. I do not think either of this private litigation or the government petition could be viewed as a prosecution against religion. With respect to the dissolution order, I believe it is inappropriate for a judicial person, regardless of affiliation with religion or faith, to receive favorable tax benefits when that person has caused substantial harm to public welfare. Dissolution order is primarily an issue whether to maintain judicial personality, accompany tax benefits for the questionable legal entity. So on the other hand, a child abuse Q&A, this has been recently issued by the government and giving a Q&A, pattern Q&A for some questionable situations on the backdrop of religion. In terms of the child abuse Q&A, its scope is unlimited. This is not fact specific. Please former slide. This is not fact specific, but general. So I believe this area can arise substantial conflict with respect to the freedom of faith, and I think we need to be cautious. In this area, in principle, limitations must be minimized. So I think the assumed facts for the child abuse Q&A appears to me serious cases involving neglect and abuse. This is why the Q&A basically says that religion is not a reason to hesitate intervene. So I think this could cause some conflict with freedom of faith, but that if the assumed fact patterns and applications are limited to serious cases, I think it's not likely to be problematic. But if it's applied broadly, generally, it could be problematic with respect to the freedom of faith. So, what if, for example, the religion or faith often bears fruits that are consistent with the values and the legal system, or otherwise, the purpose and the manner of the conducts are consistent with such values. And we have next slide, please. We have Pastor Kyoko. Yes. So this is a good example for minimal restriction. The final slide, please. So, finally, as conclusion, my observation of the current status and the suggested approaches, courts and the government and the Japanese people may be presuming that religion is unreasonable and untestable by logic and evidence. This position is believed to be true because religion or faith has not been proclaimed as truth in a worthy manner in Japan. Truth needs to be defendable with reasons. Reason includes logical consistency within the Holy Scriptures, no contradiction with historical facts, and fulfillment of prophecies and reliable testimonies. In my view, Christianity is defendable both with reason and evidence. Historical evidence for resurrection of Jesus, internal consistency within the Bible, fulfillment of prophecy. The Christian ratio of Japan is less than 1% of population, but I think it would be wonderful if gospel is actively spread in Japan. By doing these efforts, it would become possible to encourage Japanese people to examine spiritual beings by reason and logic to see if they are trustworthy. This sensible approach will help preventing cult problems to arise in Japan, and religion and faith to be achieved its rightful place in society. And thank you for attention.
Never get your live that again.
時間どんくらいあげた305分から。これですね。
やりましょう、私と。
大丈夫です、大丈夫です。動かしないで。先に田中先生がやる。
Now we do want to explain about another religious group, which is called Jehovah's Witnesses there in Japan. We do representatives, we do lawyers and we are representatives of the team of lawyers and medical doctors who are dealing with the cases, problems, the issues of Jehovah's Witnesses there in Japan. Y ya que estamos aquí en España, en español también deseamos saludarles. Estamos muy agradecidos por poder participar de esta reunión tan significativa. During Japan, we have 0.2 million Jehovah's Witnesses believers. Seeing that Japan is not a country of Christendom, and most of them do not believe in God, actually. So speaking about the basic culture of Japan, this number of the Jehovah's Witnesses is something very impressive, and the percentage is pretty high compared to other religions. And the Jehovah's Witnesses has a history of 75 years there in Japan. And something very important is that no Japanese government, no Japanese society had such a attention toward that religious group. Okay, we've heard of Jehovah's Witnesses, but we didn't know very well. They are a bit mysterious people. They are good. It was a common impression of the Japanese people toward Jehovah's Witnesses. But last year, in the year 2024, the circumstances and the situation regarding the Jehovah's Witnesses there in Japan drastically and decisively changed. The reason why that change occurred is that, the same, because there was a assassination of a very powerful politician, Shinzo Abe, and after that, first, the Japanese government clarified their attitude. They clarified their policy regarding the child abuse related to religion. And they made a very powerful paper, the guideline, which bans the child abuse related to the religion. It is one factor. And another factor is that we, the team of lawyers who are supporting former Jehovah's Witnesses, we revealed what was hidden inside the cocoon of the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses there in Japan. I mean, there has been a very serious and cruel child abuse inside the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, and nobody knew that. And we have interviewed more than 600 people and made a paper of big amount, and we gave it to the Japanese government. So now the Japanese government and Japanese society suddenly got to have a very keen interest and a very tremendous interest, and also deep and serious consideration toward the people of Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, last year, the news reports regarding Jehovah's Witnesses in TV or internet or newspapers was such a series of very big explosions. Every week, every month, we saw that kind of news. And briefly, I explained about the purpose of this presentation. Mr. Tabata will explain more detail about our report.
Hi, my name is Jun Tabata. I'm a member of the legal team against Jehovah's Witness. I run an office in run a law office in the suburbs of Tokyo. This picture, my daughter wrote it. The title is that on a business trip. And the government guidelines and the laws cited in this announcement not so accurate, and they are mainly based on Google and ChatGPT. So please listen with the assumption that there may be inaccurate translations. I will first discuss the history and the environment of the religion in Japan, which will help us understand the status of Jehovah's Witness activities in Japan. Until the 16th century, the Japanese had never seen a Christian. Francis Xavier, who was sent to Japan by the Jesuit, was the first one. Jesuit arrived in Japan 1549 and devoted himself to evangelism in Japan and India, and is said to have led more people to the Christian faith than St. Paul. He is canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church. Many missionaries followed Xavier, and Christianity steadily increased in its number and of believers from commoners to feudal lords. However, Hideyoshi Toyotomi, who unified Japan, banned Christianity. Why did he ban Christianity, which was becoming so popular? There were two reasons for that. The first reason is that Japanese rulers feared rebellion by religious forces. Japanese rulers were wary of Christians, sometimes joining forces with Christian countries to start a rebellion. In fact, a large-scale rebellion called the Shimabara Rebellion occurred. The picture is Shiro Amakusa, the rebellion leader. In the 16th century in Japan, which was divided into small states, Buddhist sect named Ikko sect held a large territory and a strong army, and was feared by feudal lords. The colored area in the map is controlled by the Ikko sect, and the Japanese rulers feared that Christianity would become like this. The photo shows one of the flags raised by the military forces of the Ikko sect. It says, "If you move forward, you will be reborn in heaven. If you move backward, you will fall into eternal hell." Their fighting spirit was strong, and the lords of Japan became extremely wary of the dangers of the religious forces. That's the first reason. The second reason is that export of Japanese slaves. Another reason for the ban of Christian missionary work was that it became clear that Christian countries were exporting Japanese slaves. More than 10,000 Japanese slaves were taken to Southeast Asia, South Asia, Europe, and Central and South America over at least a decade. Regardless of the facts, Japan's feudal laws viewed the missionaries and the slave traders as working together. For the two reasons, Japanese rulers considered Christianity dangerous, and Christianity was banned in Japan. As a result, there were almost no believers. On the contrary, Buddhism was incorporated into the system as a tool of control, and its original religious activities ceased. Christianity was banned, and Buddhism was corrupted. As a result, Japan has become a religious vacuum. Japan became isolated and remained free from foreign influence until 19th century. After 19th century, Japan ended its isolationism and began to modernize. As I just mentioned, there were almost no Christians in Japan, and Buddhism had also lost its religious power. So the Japanese government, seeking a religious support for the people, made Shinto the national religion. However, imperial Shinto was a religion that differed from the original Shinto, and its content was dictated by the government. Imperial Shintoism, which deems Japan's ruler, the emperor, as a living god, gradually became a tool of control for the Empire of Japan. In the past, as I told, Japanese rulers feared warriors who did not fear even death due to the Buddhist beliefs. Imperial Shinto used these brave religious warriors for the government's benefit. Banzai attack or kamikaze attacks are the example. JW finally appeared in this era. In 1926, Japanese Junzo Akashi was appointed by Watchtower and came to Japan to establish the Japanese branch. This picture is a magazine they published. However, Jehovah's Witness faith is incompatible with Imperial Shinto, which holds the emperor as a living god. For denying the divine authority of the emperor, he was found guilty of violating the infamous Peace Preservation Act, and the group eventually ceased to exist. Then Japan was completely destroyed and defeated in the World War II. The authority of the ruler, the emperor, was denied by the American military, and Imperial Shinto was no longer the state religion. The Japanese people have lost their spiritual support in religion. The US military was wary of Imperial Shinto's influence during World War II, and they had a strong influence on the new constitution. Specifically, freedom of religion and the separation of church and state were written into the new constitution. After religious freedom was guaranteed in the new constitution after World War II, many new religions became active. Takashi, who preached before World War II, left JW. But in 1949, evangelists from Hawaii and Australia visited Japan, and the number of believers continued to increase. This is religious population in modern Japan. In terms of number of believers, Buddhism is blue. Accounts for 40%, and Shintoism, salmon pink, account for 50% of the population. While Christianity, small pink, is for only 1 to 1.5%. The number of believers in Christian religions in Japan is estimated to be 2 million. However, as we have seen through history, although there are many believers in both Buddhism and Shinto, both have suffered major growth throughout history, and many of them are just registered believers without having any faith. The number of believers, Jehovah's Witnesses have 0.2 million believers, and the Catholic is 0.4 million. Considering the size of the original sect, there are extremely large number of JW believers in Japan. JW not only have a very large number of believers, but Japan is also an important base for JWs. For example, the Japan's branch huge printing factory prints a total of 13.2 million JW magazines every month. And since 2013, more than 20 million Bibles have been produced in more than 100 languages and shipped to more than 15 countries around the world. As the number of believers increases, so do programs. Jehovah's Witnesses have often caused social problems due to their unique doctrine. Here are 3 examples of social programs in Japan. 1. Death of 10-year-old child due to the refusal of blood transfusion. A 10-year-old boy in Japan was involved in a traffic accident and died after his parents refused a blood transfusion. Refusal of blood transfusion became a social issue after the boy's father told the boy said that he wanted to live. This incident was featured in novels and TV dramas in Japan and became a national hot topic. Number 2, case of refusal kendo class. Kendo means Japanese fencing, like that picture. Kendo was a compulsory class in Japan, but the students who were Jehovah's Witnesses refused for its religious reasons. The school gave these students suspension of grade and expulsion. The Supreme Court ruled that the suspension of grade and expulsion of students were illegal. Number 3, Jehovah's Witness blood transfusion refusal trial. A Jehovah's Witness member refused a blood transfusion, but the doctor performed the transfusion without permission. The member then sued the doctor and the hospital for damages. The Supreme Court ordered the doctor to pay 550,000 yen. This Supreme Court precedent still discourages medical personnel from performing blood transfusions. In this way, JWs have caused friction with Japanese society on many occasions. Although they do not address all these aspects, the government has recently established guidelines for the issues of child abuse. The problem of second-generation religions has become known as a serious problem in Japan, not just among Jehovah's Witnesses. The Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare released a Q&A of religious abuse to solve this problem. Regarding acts defined as an abuse in Q&A, personal experiences of abuse were told by second-generation JW believers, but the overall picture was not clear. And then we formed a legal team and conducted a large-scale investigation into the actual state of abuse from May 10 to June 2023. The Child Abuse Prevention Act classifies abuse into 4 types. Number 1, physical abuse. Number 2, psychological abuse. Number 3, sexual abuse. Number 4, neglect. The purpose of these guidelines is to demonstrate that religious motives are not an excuse for child abuse. The legal team believes that the religious abuse Q&A is a strong standard for determining whether or not the case falls under the religious abuse. Therefore, we conducted an investigation into the existence of abuse regarding JW using the religious abuse Q&A as a standard. The survey contents are as follows. Number one, was there any abusive behavior that falls under the religious abuse Q&A among JW? Number two, if abuse occurs, its mode and degree. Number three, what mechanism caused the abuse? Number four, psychological and economic problems faced by second-generation believers. We say that abuse is structured like a tree. The root is the most important. The root is such as justification of abuse based on strong beliefs, or mutual monitoring of believers and control by the superior. Then the trunk comes, such as the doctrine of physical abuse with the whip, or doctrine of neglect related to life-threatening situations, such as refusal of blood transfusions. And the result is branches and leaves, like forced missionary work or not participating in school events and limiting friends. The survey received a large number of responses, and the actual situation is continuous and systematic abuse became clear. We received 581 responses, and continuous means abuse is not contemporary and tend to last for decades. Systematic means similar abuses have been reported in various parts of Japan over a long period of time. And the content of the abuse matches the doctrine presented in the church materials. In addition, the doctrine was also used in materials other than the church materials. Number one, instilling fear of Armageddon. Some of the survey results are as follows. 99 people surveyed were taught about Armageddon. This answer corresponds 3-1 of the Q&A. Words such as, if you don't do something, you will go to hell and you will be destroyed, and images that incite fear, threatening a child with materials, instilling fear in the child, and obstructing the child-free decision-making by continuously displaying a negative attitude, all falls under the category of psychological abuse of neglect. Number two, experience of being tortured by a whip. 92 of respondents said that they had experienced abuse with a whip. Needless to say, assault and injury are crimes in Japan as well. Number three, possession rate of blood transfusion refusal card. This survey targeted people under the age of 18 who participated in JW activities. 81% of those surveyed had a card in advance stating they would refuse blood transfusions. For 5 of the QA corresponds to this. acts in which a guardian does not allow a child to see a doctor without reasonable ground, or parents do not allow children to undergo medical procedure even though a doctor has determined that such procedure are necessary. The two cases fall under neglect regardless of the reason. Number 4, not participating in school events. 96% of those surveyed has certain experience of not being able to participate in school events. 4/6 of the QA corresponds to this. If a child wishes to participate in school events, the act of a guardian restricting participation without taking into account the child's appropriate upbringing and educational opportunities may constitute psychological abuse or neglect, and the religious reasons are not ground for exemption. Number 5, friendship relationship restrictions. 93% of those surveyed said they had experienced restrictions on friendship and relationship due to the religious reasons. Q&A 3.2 corresponds to this. If a child's friendships are restricted in general and the child's social skills are impaired, it falls down under neglect. ちょっと飛ばしてって
そうだね。
で、But the result of the investigation were received with astonishment by society, and the legal team's announcement was widely reported on almost all domestic TV stations and major newspapers. Regarding the issue of child abuse among Jehovah's Witnesses, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida stated in the Diet on November 23, 2022, 2023, even if there is a background of religious belief, it is never acceptable. The legal team has the highest priority of gathering accurate information and publishing it. This is because even though JW have 0.2 million members in Japan, the actual situation was not known. In fact, the defense team is not currently handling an individual case involving JW. However, this does not mean that our legal team will not pursue lawsuits in the future if there is clear evidence of human rights violations.
Okay, the conclusion, in a nutshell, what we want to say is the following 4 points. First, the Japanese branch office of Jehovah's Witnesses is something very important for the whole organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. But Japanese Jehovah's Witnesses is now receiving the tremendous very big interest from the society and government. Especially regarding the child abuse. I just said is that the child abuse there in Japan is something incredible. I just said it is a very cruel and severe, and it's a very, very torture. I think maybe the situation of the physical child abuse there in Japan is incomparable to what's happening in other countries. The second point is that The reason why the society and the Japanese society started to pay attention to Jehovah's Witnesses there in Japan is that the Japanese government made a very powerful paper, the guideline which bans the child abuse related to the religion. And of course, because of the research of our investigation. And the third point is that now in Japan, society is starting to be interested in not only in the child abuse, but also in the problems or issues of the greater believer of Jehovah's Witnesses, including adults, like issue of refusal of blood transfusion or shining, and other things. And finally, the fourth point, which we want to express is that the activities against the issues or problem of Jehovah's Witnesses there in Japan just started. Last year, it started. So what we can do now is that for time being, just providing the information toward the foreign countries, the specialists of other countries, and receiving the information from you, from the advanced countries. This is reason why we came here. Thank you so much.